And now, story time by Tommy Nation Politics.
A backlash on Capitol Hill appears to be fueling the pushback within the administration. Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican Louisiana, who chairs the Senate's Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, privately contacted Trump officials to ask for a briefing on Doge's impact on his committee's jurisdiction, saying that he wanted to be prepared to respond to Democrats' attacks on Doge's work, according to someone familiar with the senator's request. But as long as Trump allows Musk to continue to pursue broad changes, federal agencies will at least have to watch Doge's actions, many analysts point out. As long as Doge has the support of Trump, agency employees are going to have to take everything they say seriously, said Jessica Riedel, senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute, a center-right think tank. Doge has a line of authority that goes straight to the Oval Office, and federal agencies can cross them at their own peril. Lisa Rain, Maxine Hosello, Fee Siddiqui, John Hudson, and Jacqueline Alamani contributed to this report.
Maybe just also your overall thoughts about all of the lawsuits that are being brought against the Trump administration.
There are multiple cases, and some are brought, like our case, by actual pregnant women whose babies would be affected by this birthright citizenship order. Others are brought by the states, right? Two different groups of states who would be affected because if a number of their residents are no longer considered citizens and the federal government doesn't provide certain benefits, that means those states are going to have to take over providing those benefits. Now, obviously, the legal issues are the same in all. There's just different plaintiffs. The legal issues are about what does the 14th Amendment mean? Trump's executive order would have eliminated birthright citizenship for the children of women who are here with unlawful presence, so people often think of undocumented, but also mothers who are here on lawful presence, but temporary, like a student visa, a work visa, potentially temporary protected status, maybe even people with pending asylum applications, all unless the father was a U.S. citizen or a lawful permanent resident. So that means thousands and thousands of people who were in chaos, not knowing if their children were going to be citizens, which is a huge thing. It confers all kinds of benefits, and it also gives you status to be here. So what the court said.
Let me ask you about some of your other promises on this topic. You've promised to end birthright citizenship on day one. Is that still your plan?
Yeah, absolutely.
The 14th Amendment, though, says that, quote, all persons born in the United States are citizens. Can you get around the 14th Amendment with an executive action?
We're going to have to get a change. We'll maybe have to go back to the people, but we have to end it. We're the only country that has it.
Through an executive action?
You know, we're the only country that has it. Do you know, if somebody sets a foot, just a foot, 1 foot, you don't need two, on our land, congratulations, you are now a citizen of the United States of America. Yes, we're going to end that because it's ridiculous.
Through executive action?
Well, if we can, through executive action. I was going to do it through executive action, but then we had to fix COVID first, to be honest with you.
Heard on Wednesday in a preliminary injunction motion, there had already been a temporary restraining order issued by a Washington state judge the previous week, but that's a very temporary 14-day order. Our judge ruled from the bench that there was no support in the text of the 14th Amendment, the 125-year history since a Supreme Court case, Wong King Sum, made clear what birthright citizenship covers, and in just the way we've treated it throughout our history. And so then we saw that repeated by the judge in Washington the next day, and then we had another case argued yesterday we're waiting on a decision on, and there's another case being argued Monday.
On that, just one other point, Simone and I were noting the fact during the break that the argument that the administration is making in this space on birthright citizenship is that the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment only applies to slavery. So they now all of a sudden they're concerned about the application of things to things in history like slavery so that they can make the case that those immigrants' children who are born here are not U.S. citizens.
I think it's going to be litigated in court. You don't think I'm going to stand up for you?
Okay, one town hall during a congressional recess doesn't speak for America, but there was a town hall in the 7th Congressional District in Georgia, that's north of Atlanta. Republican Rich McCormick was there. Yes, progressives from his district got there early, got all the seats. There were Republicans and Trump supporters there, but it was a raucous crowd. And the crowd there expressed some measure of anger over the Department of Government efficiency, reduction of federal jobs, and perhaps future spending cuts. It's worth noting that other Republican lawmakers during this same congressional recess encountered some pushback in their districts. So what does this all mean? Julie Grace Brufke and Finn Gomez join me now at the table. Julie Grace, senior political correspondent at the Daily Beast. Finn, of course, our esteemed CBS News political director. All right, Rich McCormick's district, plus 22, meaning plus 22 Republican. So not that many progressives, and they all got there early. So, Julie Grace, does this mean anything? Is this a potential tremor the Trump world ought to pay attention to?
So, I mean, I definitely think that it is kind of, I've talked to a number of lawmakers today about this issue. And
you did? Okay. What'd they tell you?
I think a lot of districts across the country, they're facing some backlash. I talked to one lawmaker today that said one big problem they've faced from constituents reaching out are some of these probationary federal workers that have kind of been on for a year that have been fired over what they're saying are performance issues, but ultimately aren't, where people are losing their security clearances, and it's saying they're these poor performers. It's kind of hindering their ability to get new jobs, which is a big thing. And
whether they were poor performers or not, they're just sort of being declared that, and they don't have any recourse, and they're losing their job, and that might jeopardize their employment prospects going forward.
Exactly.
That's going to tick you off as a constituent.
So that may be sort of a bigger talking point. That is not what they argued in the papers in our case, and that's not what I've seen them arguing in the papers. They're arguing in the papers that 14th Amendment applies to people born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereto. And the argument the government is making is that subject to the jurisdiction thereto means you have to have 100% allegiance to the United States and not any allegiance to any foreign country. That's not supported by history of what that clause meant. It's also not supported, more importantly, by binding Supreme Court precedent in a case called Wong Kim Ark that dates to the very late 1800s. And so, but if you took it to what their theory then is, if you are lawfully present here, but temporarily, say on a student visa, you still have some allegiance to your country of origin, right? Because you're here on a temporary student visa. Problem is, that's just made up. That's not in the 14th Amendment.
But what does that have to do with the baby that's born here? Their allegiance is to the hospital they're in. But anyway.
And that's what our judge said. Babies born here, what Wong Kim Ark says and what the Constitution is their allegiance is to the United States of America.
Yeah.
So I want to make good on our promise to get to the breaking news we have on Doge. This is from New York Judge Paul Engelmeyer in a statement. The court's firm assessment is that for the reasons stated by the states, they will face irreparable harm in the absence of injunctive relief. That is both because of the risk that the new policy presents of the disclosure of sensitive and confidential information and the heightened risk that the systems in question will be more vulnerable than before to hacking. This question of sensitive information to me seems to be a thread, whether you're talking about FBI agents who are worried about having their names released, whether you're talking about the Treasury Department and all of our potentially sensitive information. Once it is out there, there's no putting that genie back in the bottle.
Yeah, that is why you're seeing courts here in New York, courts in D.C. taking this action, because it's one of these things where it's like, look, we have to do it now because, there is no remedy afterwards. This is something that, if the public learns of this, we're done. And it's really important to remember that this is an administration that has clearly shown that making something public to put a target on someone's back, they have already done that. So just take Dr. Fauci. The administration didn't just say we're pulling your security. They publicly announced that they're doing it. The only reason to publicly announce that is to send a message to future people and to put a target on his back.
Come resistance from within the Trump administration to the orders of his U.S. Doge service, intensifying a remarkable high-level power struggle over the fate of the federal workforce. Over the last several days, more than a dozen federal agencies, primarily led by Trump-appointed cabinet secretaries, told employees that they did not need to comply with the Musk directive to email a list of what they had done in the past week. The rebuke was the most striking display yet of internal dissatisfaction with Doge's moves across the federal government, reflecting the desire of many Trump officials to reassert control over agencies that Musk has tried to gut, in some instances without their explicit permission. But Musk has fought back, publicly condemning those who resisted and calling for federal employees to face a second order to explain their work accomplishments. His Doge team, meanwhile, escalated its multi-pronged assault on the bureaucracy, preparing for a new round of even more sweeping layoffs and moving to cancel additional grants and other forms of federal spending. According to interviews with more than 36 government officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity to reflect private deliberations, Musk surrogates, for instance, have in recent days directed the Department of Veterans Affairs to cut more than 800 existing federal contracts, internal records obtained by the Washington Post show. Doge helped implement at least a partial freeze on government credit cards, ceasing the work of employees who need to bill expenses. And while many agency heads have rebuffed him in recent days, Musk has installed officials viewed as sympathetic to his aims at more and more agencies, including, in the last few days, the Internal Revenue Service and Social Security Administration, which could give him a far freer hand to implement his agenda. Late Monday evening, Musk said on X that federal employees will be given another chance to respond to his email, but that failure to respond a second time will result in termination. While not attacking any of Trump's advisors by name, Musk slammed those who had blocked the request in an implicit rebuke of the president's cabinet nominees. The email request was utterly trivial, as the standard for passing the test was to type some words and press send. Yet so many failed even that inane test, urged on in some cases by their managers. Have you ever witnessed such incompetence and contempt for how your taxes are being spent? The developments brought into increasing public view the extraordinary tug-of-war between the president's billionaire surrogate and the other senior Trump aides who will have to execute Musk's vision of drastically shrinking the U.S. government. Musk has previously faced setbacks from federal courts, but now is running into new sources of opposition, including some Republicans in Congress, as he races to remake the U.S. government in ways some critics call illegal. At least a dozen agencies have said that employees do not have to answer the email asking what they did last week, according to records obtained by the Post. Those include the Justice Department, led by Attorney General Pam Bondi, the State Department, led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and the Defense Department, led by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, among other senior aides with impeccable credentials as Trump allies. A weekend clash saw Doge-driven cuts at the Education Department softened, people familiar with the situation said. Let's be realistic. What we saw over the last week was a huge rebuke of Elon, said a former Trump administration official who remains in close contact with current officials. Trump's cabinet is finally beginning to realize the power of holding Senate-confirmed positions, which require a huge amount of political capital to replace. Several senior Trump officials said they had little to no warning of the Office of Personnel Management's bullet points email before Musk's X post on Saturday, and then were deluged within minutes by questions from their own teams about how to respond. The officials also recounted spending much of the weekend strategizing over the OPM's authority and what would happen if their agencies lost more workers. It was another Elon Musk headache, said one Trump appointee, who said they were supportive of Doge's ambitions, but growing weary of its interruptions. Every day, same team, different problems. But still, at least 11 other agencies expressly directed staffers that they should respond to Musk's request, emails obtained by the Post showed. The scope of Musk's authority will ultimately be decided by President Donald Trump, who has given mixed signals. In recent days, he has repeatedly affirmed his support for Musk, saying on social media that he wants him to get more aggressive, but refrained, at least thus far, from mandating his cabinet secretaries to comply with every dictate, such as the email requiring federal employees to provide a bulleted list of 5 things they had achieved in the previous week. On Tuesday, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt reiterated to reporters that cabinet secretaries have discretion over whether their employees need to answer Musk's email, even as she sought to downplay tensions among the president's top advisors. Leavitt also said more than 1 million employees had replied to the email. The president defers to his cabinet secretaries, who he's obviously entrusted to pursue the guidance relative to their specific workforce, Leavitt said. Musk is forging ahead with plans of striking ambition, in part with the cooperation of federal employees, and sometimes because he has gotten allies into key roles. A startlingly large number of federal employees, contracts, and functions have come under Doge crosshairs just in the last few days, on top of the mass dismissals of new workers and early federal retirement incentives already implemented by Musk's team. At the Interior Department, Doge staff have asked officials to submit proposals for shrinking the agency's workforce by between 10% and 40% by the end of this week, according to two people familiar with the matter, who spoke on the condition of anonymity for fear of retaliation. Officials at the National Park Service, which is part of the Interior Department, have sought to find ways of complying with Doge's directive without cutting more essential staff at national parks, one of the people said. A spokesperson for Interior declined to comment. At Doge's behest, meanwhile, VA plans to cancel 875 contracts, including those that help to provide medical services, recruit doctors, and provide burial services to veterans.
You would normally do that quietly. You would not want people to know, oh, by the way, we just made this target easier. And so here, if you are at the FBI, if you are anyone with information that the Treasury Department has, which, by the way, is everyone who is listening to this program, everybody has that information. This is, by the way, such a repeat of Trump 1.0. Everyone thought, oh, you know what, they're going to have their act together. They've had so much time to pull their ducks in a row, or whatever expression you want to use for that. And they haven't. This is the kind of thing where you didn't need Elon Musk to do it. You could have done all of this in a way that wouldn't have caused judges of all sort of political stripes and persuasions saying, wrong. This is really not being done right. And that's why you're seeing Mary win her case. All sorts of judges all over entering these TROs, these temporary restraining orders.
According to two sources familiar with the move, speaking anonymously because they are not authorized to discuss the issue publicly. One of those contracts provides services needed to safely dispose of chemical waste, while another supports environmental testing to meet safety standards, according to internal records reviewed by the Post. A VA spokesperson said the department will not be canceling any such contracts. Veterans Affairs Secretary Douglas A. Collins said the cuts saved $2 billion from inefficiencies such as PowerPoint slides and trainings. Officials sympathetic to Doge are now in positions crucial to the disbursement of trillions of dollars in federal funds. The White House confirmed Tuesday that Amy Gleason, who used to work for the firm founded by Doge advisor Brad Smith, will be the U.S. Doge Service Administrator. Musk himself is officially a special government employee who's advising the White House and Doge's effort, the administration has said. At the Internal Revenue Service, Melanie Krause, an official who had demonstrated a much greater willingness to work with Doge, was named acting commissioner on Tuesday, replacing a leader more skeptical of Musk's efforts, according to two people familiar with the matter. At the Treasury Department, Tom Krause, a Doge affiliate, has been appointed to oversee the Bureau of the Fiscal Service after the departure of a career civil servant who refused to give Musk's team access to the sensitive payment system. And at Social Security, Leland Dudek, a mid-level official who was helping Doge gain access to key databases, was suddenly named acting commissioner. Dudek has made major changes in less than a week, dismantling a key department that focused on analytics and oversight of agency operations, shifting departments and who they report to, sidelining most of the Civil Rights Office, and killing an office devoted to helping improve customer service. As of Tuesday, Musk's group had embedded more than 10 tech engineers at the agency. Still, there have been signs that Musk is being forced to bend to political reality. Late last week, Doge staffers informed staff at the Education Department that they needed to make deep cuts in the range of 60 to 75% for contracts, including a landmark testing program called the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which the agency had vowed to preserve, according to several people familiar with the matter. Senior staff pushed back, telling Doge that with cuts that deep, the department could not run the next round of math and reading tests, which are conducted every 2 years. By Monday, the demand for cuts had shrunk, the People said. Asked for comment, a department spokeswoman deferred to Leslie Muldoon, executive director of the National Assessment Governing Board, which sets policy for the NAEP. Muldoon said that the board has been working with the agency to find efficiencies and cost savings for several years, and that this work continues with the Education Department's new leadership. Similarly, leaders at the nation's health department appear to have felt emboldened to defy Musk's demands after first wrestling over whether to instruct staff to comply. The guidance played out in a series of contradictory messages to the tens of thousands of employees across their agencies. Officials at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services wrote to staff on Saturday evening that staffers must reply before leaders at the Department of Health and Human Services, which oversees CMS and other health agencies, reversed course on Monday and said that compliance was not necessary. The HHS email also warned that workers should be wary of malign foreign actors reading their responses to Musk's email, a subtle acknowledgement of the OPM's history of cybersecurity breaches, according to a senior HHS official. At the OPM, which Musk allies are running, officials are walking back the firing of some probationary employees, according to a person briefed on a call the OPM held with agency heads Monday. The OPM told agencies on the call that they should not have fired military spouses, veterans, or disabled veterans, and that agencies should work to reinstate those employees, the person said.